Since Greece and Rome were predominantly oral societies, their narrative palette was richer than ours, both in the frequency with which they told stories and in the number and kinds of stories they told. Ancient literature teems with tales and with representations of persons telling and exchanging them. The Greeks and Romans had all the genres of oral narrative known to us, even ghost stories and urban legends. But they also told kinds of stories that in most of the Western world no longer circulate orally, such as myths and fairy tales, which for us have become book genres, stories that we now encounter in published compilations, rather than as living narratives. The great majority of these stories are set not in the distant mythological past, but in the historical period, the so-called human era, and their gaze is accordingly not upon the feats of gods and heroes, but upon the doings of human beings of different sorts. Rulers, merchants, sages, seers, priests, athletes, artists, statesmen, soldiers, farmers, thieves, and so on. Among them are famous and sometimes foundational figures of the Western world, such as the lawgiver Solon, the fabulist Aesop, the mystic Pythagoras, the philosopher Plato, the dramatist Sophocles, the athlete Milo, the orator Cicero, the mathematician Archimedes, the conqueror Alexander the Great, the statesman Cato, the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, the Roman emperor Nero, and the Jewish prophet Jesus. These stories could well be labelled the other mythology. In the world of ancient narrative, animals sometimes talk. Diogenes the Cynic and Alexander the Great converse, and deities intervene in human affairs if and when they wish. Although human beings are in the foreground, the world they move in includes gods and nature spirits, satyrs, centaurs, nymphs, shape changers, lamias, werewolves, the quasi-dead, ghosts, revenants, and other beings. These are the tales that Greeks and Romans recounted in their everyday lives, and they offer a unique window into the fantasies, anxieties, humour, passions, and values of ancient persons young and old, male and female, free and slave. They show us what made the ancients ponder, or shudder, or laugh. The present volume offers a wide selection of traditional oral stories. It emphasises informal narratives such as legends, novellae, anecdotes, jokes, fables, fairy tales, and the like, many of which are not easily accessible, even to classical scholars, and is the most extensive compilation of ancient popular tales ever made, exceeding in coverage the pioneering anthology of Greek tales published over a century ago by August Hausrath and August Marx, Griechische Märchen, Fabeln, Schwänke und Novellen aus dem klassischen Altertum. Greek fairy tales, fables, humorous tales, and novella from classical antiquity. I offer these tales for their crystallizations of ancient life and thought, as well as for the pure enjoyment they afford as stories, as expressions of an old and exquisite art. In the introduction, I provide an overview of the genres of ancient oral narrative, something attempted here for the first time. Of course, listeners who are impatient with talk about stories can proceed directly to the tales themselves. All listeners are invited to imagine themselves as guests of Helen, who, as Homer relates in the 4th book of his Odyssey, slips her wondrous drug, Nepenthe, into the wine bowl, bids the chalices be filled, banishing grief and anger and all thought of miseries, and proposes that the company pass the time pleasantly in the telling of stories.